Hi, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to our special 3-day event, Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart. If you can hear us okay, please let us know in the chat pane, and you'll notice we've also dropped a couple of questions in there that we'd love to get your input on. First, where you're joining us from, what you do in the data center industry, and what are you most looking forward to learning at Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart? So this is day one of a 3-day event. I'm Joshua Feinberg. I help data center go-to-market teams get found much earlier on in the buyer's journey, differentiate, achieve trusted advisor status, and be able to command premium pricing throughout their full buyer's journey so they can drive sustainable, profitable revenue growth. I also host the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. Up on the screen there, you can see some of the guests who've appeared on season 1 and some of the guests who are appearing on season 2. We're just wrapping up season 2 now over the next few weeks. And we've been thrilled to welcome guests from some of the top industry leading companies throughout the data center, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities ecosystem. You can see some of those companies that have appeared or will be appearing on the Data Center podcast, Data Center Go-to-Market podcast in upcoming episodes. You may have also seen me speak at some of the industry's more popular conferences, and I've served in leadership roles in a number of IT, sales, marketing, and entrepreneurial-related organizations. In addition to spending most of my career working with small businesses, startups, and scale-ups, I've also been privileged to work as a contractor on some pretty big enterprise projects, both with Microsoft's small business server team and Microsoft's Direct Access Channel Partner Program. I've been heavily involved in the HubSpot channel partner ecosystem for the better part of a decade. I began my career working for IBM Academic Information Systems in a sales and marketing evangelist kind of role. I first came to the data center industry about 10 years ago as a byproduct of work that I'd been doing over the previous decade and a half or so, working with managed service providers and value-added resellers and IT consulting firms. In the early 2010s, I saw a lot of companies in that model who were used to serving as fractional CTOs for their small and medium-sized businesses, struggling to make the shift from premise-based client server to SaaS and cloud. The ones who had figured out that business model transformation generally went in one of 3 directions. Either they moved upmarket into mid-market ERP, enterprise resource planning, or something similar to that. Another third of them got involved in custom software development, building web apps and mobile apps, and another third of them went really deep on infrastructure. Infrastructure as a service, IaaS as we now know it, usually started with one of those consulting or integrator firms or MSPs putting one of their own servers in a co-location facility, and they rented it out, slices of it, to their existing fractional CTO clients. In other cases, they once in a while would have a really progressive client who would come back from a big industry conference like a manufacturing conference or a hospitality conference, and they would say to their MSP, their fractional CTO, "We have no idea what co-location means, but we were told we need to co-locate a server. You're our outsourced CTO. You figure out what that means. Just tell us what it's going to cost and where to sign up for that." So that was my first brush. And for the first year or two, I understood the technology part of it. Over time, I got to know facilities and construction and real estate and all the different kind of operators and all the different kind of investments, companies that are involved in and around data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. But it can be a complicated area for a lot of people to get their feet into when they're first getting started. I often liken this, I give it the analogy of you need to kind of be like the hop-on, hop-off bus tour guide or the tram operator in a big amusement park where you're taking people around the full ecosystem and giving them a little taste of what it all is to be able to better understand what's going on. Over at DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, we're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the industry, individually, as teams, and as companies. So what is on the agenda for today, day one of the Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart? First, we're going to get into Data Center Go-to-Market 101, appropriately selected for a 3-day event on Data Center Go-to-Market. Then we'll talk about how data center sales has changed and give you some tools and methodologies to figure out if your team is keeping up or living in the past. And then we'll head down the home stretch of this today by talking about how to market and sell to CTOs, chief technology officers, and chief information officers. So first up, let's talk about data center go-to-market 101. This is especially relevant for the full go-to-market team. How do we define the full go-to-market team? Sales, marketing, account management, product management, channel partnership management, and the executive sponsor, the leadership that stitches this all together, kind of like as a master alignment artist, as a orchestra conductor, getting everyone to play in the right tempo, at the right volume, at the right time. And that is no small feat, regardless of whether your company is a data center operator, for example, like co-location, hyperscale, edge, modular, or wholesale, or maybe your company provides technology or facilities related products and services in and around data centers, or perhaps you do something related to construction, design, build, site selection, real estate, or perhaps you're an investor. Perhaps your company does something related to venture capital or private equity, or something similar to that in and around digital infrastructure. And then there's a whole separate segment of the digital infrastructure data center industry that's all about outsourced sales and marketing. So regardless of what you do on a go-to-market team, and regardless of your role in the data center ecosystem, you're for sure in for a real treat over the next 3 days. So whenever we're planning a big event like this, we're always curious about your biggest challenge. What's your biggest challenge specific to go-to-market? Please share that in the chat pane. We'd love to know. When we ask this of you and when we've talked about this topic, we generally hear things like identifying and connecting with the right decision maker, improving new client generation, lead generation, starting up, expansion challenges, understanding and targeting specific markets, the relevance of messaging and communications. So yeah, we connecting with the right decision makers for sure, targeting the right people. So in terms of data center go-to-market 101, the first place to start is I want you to think about your sales process, and specifically adapting your sales process to support your prospects and your clients' buying process. It's no longer just about how you want to sell to your prospects and clients. It's about supporting how they want to buy. It's a client-centric approach, and it's a very important approach because of major changes that have happened over the last few years in purchase preferences with all different size companies throughout the full data center, critical facilities, digital infrastructure ecosystem. And we know there's enormous opportunities in this space because we can't turn around without hearing from NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang talking about how there's going to be like $1 trillion in upgrades coming to data centers over the next 4 years. And we know it may start with hyperscalers, but it's going to trickle down to the full ecosystem. And Jensen Huang's good friend, longtime IT OG, Michael Dell, is also very, very bullish on prospects for data center ecosystem growth. And he sees data center demand going up 100-fold over the next decade. So how do we participate in all of that? The big challenge for many of you is adapting to the modern buyer's journey. 10 years ago, if we were having this conversation, it was widely believed that about half of a buyer's journey, half of a sales cycle, was happening before your prospects and clients were willing to talk with someone from your sales team. In the mid-2010s, CEB, the corporate executive board that's now owned by Gartner, did research with Serious Decisions and Salesforce and found that about 56% of a typical buyer's journey was over before you got to meet a prospect or future client. Add in 10 years of digital transformation, add in millions of people working from home for a few years in the beginning of the 2020s, add in quite a few baby boomers retiring and a lot more millennials and Gen Z in decision-making roles, and we've now found that 83% of a typical buyer's journey is over before sales contact, before vendor contact. 83% of researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing now happens without you in a room. And this isn't just edge cases. This is pretty much everyone. McKinsey found 70 to 80% of companies have these kinds of preferences. So it's a really, really big deal. So how do we get your company to show up in a way that you're welcomed in, invited in into their side of the table, and you can still have a major role in shaping the criteria that they use to evaluate, research, and make their purchase decisions? Again, the key thing is that buyer preferences have really, really changed, now strongly favoring a digital buyer's journey. And because of this, sales professionals need to adapt. The bigger problem is that in a lot of companies, this adaptation, these changes can be really painful cultural changes. And building your company to effectively and appropriately engage with these leads through content and events can be a really, really massive cultural change. So how do you adopt your client-facing team members, especially your account executives, your AEs, your sales development reps, your business development reps, SDRs and BDRs? How do you adapt the full go-to-market team to be seen more like teachers, consultants, subject matter experts, trusted advisors, and perhaps some of them even raising up to the level of thought leaders? This is a really, really big deal. And this is a lot of what we're going to be talking about over the next couple of days, giving you strategies on how to do this. It's super important to be very specific about who you're trying to attract, who you're trying to educate and build trust with. We call these buyer personas. That's a semi-fictional representation of one of your ideal clients based on actual research and some select educated speculation. The actual research is incredibly important. Bob and Sally on your team may be in this industry 20, 30 years or more, and they may have a really good sense of what your buyers tend to ask them, but it may be difficult for them to articulate exactly the words of all of your different individual buyer personas. So once you are crystal clear about who your ideal client is and who those stakeholders are at that particular client, doing the actual research either through face-to-face conversations, video meetings, surveys, studying search footprints, studying social footprints, studying LinkedIn profiles, getting the consensus on each segment's biggest goals and their biggest challenges in their own words is incredibly important and can be incredibly impactful for driving your website copywriting, your product marketing, your sales enablement, all of your content, all of your educational events can really, really stand out from the crowd when you take a client-focused approach. So the challenge with all of this, however, is that a lot of companies haven't kept up with these changes and preferences. So what can you do to adapt your company to be more relevant to your client's new buying process? Second, it's super, super important for you to think about what you're going to do to build your team in this kind of environment. And when you think about this, I often tend to use sports analogies. And it really doesn't matter whether you're a fan of US sports or fans in Europe or Asia Pacific or Latin America. Think about a general manager that has a given payroll to get the best players onto their team. And there's a lot of different roles. There's a lot of different job functions. There's a lot of positions that they need to cover. The challenge when you're putting together a data center go-to-market team is you will likely need a mixture of both specialists and generalists. And I'd encourage you to model that after some of the most successful baseball teams on the planet. For those of you that are baseball fans, and it doesn't matter whether you follow American baseball or baseball in Korea or Japan or Latin America or the Caribbean or wherever else you're seeing baseball played, a typical baseball game runs 9 innings and runs about 3 hours. That's actually an interesting point of contention in the US where they're trying to speed up the pace of play because people, just like shorts and TikToks, people don't have the attention span to sit through 3-hour games anymore. So the big thing to keep in mind is that in a world now where every decision is guided by analytics called sabermetrics, and this is a big deal across all professional sports, not just baseball, it's caused baseball players to become incredibly specialized. Typically, baseball players, and you'll see the salaries that some of these players are paid is just insane, approaching Taylor Swift levels in some cases. When it comes to being a general manager, they typically will draft players, they'll sign players. They're either really good in early innings, like the first 7 innings of the game, the first 2/3 of the game, or really good in late innings when a game is really, really close, when a lot is on the line, in the 8th and 9th inning, and potentially extra innings. Most small and medium-sized businesses, most scale-ups in the data center ecosystem tend to have issues with developing a balanced go-to-market roster. And what we tend to find nearly across the board is most of their investments in go-to-market tend to go to players, tend to go to team members on the go-to-market team who are really good in late innings. And they typically severely underinvest in early innings. And this didn't used to be as big of a problem 10 years ago, but it's a pretty big problem now. Imagine that you're a professional sports team and you show up to play a baseball game And the only players that actually made it there on time were players that are typically only good in the late innings. So you put those players out on the field, and by the time you get to the middle of the game, by the time you get to the seventh inning stretch, it is a blowout. Your team is getting completely decimated because the only people you could get at the last minute to play at the professional level are maybe high school students or little leaguers or something like that. That's essentially what's going on. People are completely overlooking how much of the game is over before the decision stage, before the sales contact and the vendor contact has happened. From a practical standpoint, this usually means that your hiring decisions just are not realistically resourced for the first 60, 70, 80% of the buyer's journey when all the researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing happens. When you have an enormous opportunity to educate and build trust and shape the preferences that they use to evaluate your entire category. And again, think about what would happen if a professional team showed up and the team that they're up against has professionals, all-stars, amazing future Hall of Fame players, and you've showed up with a bunch of high school students. It doesn't matter if a small sliver of those high school students are destined for great things 2, 3, 5 years out from now. The reality is it's completely unmatched. You just won't have the coverage to be competitive. So what can you do to make sure that you set your team up for failure, up for success? Because if you go by default and all of your payroll is heavily lopsided in players who can only play in the late innings of the game, you will likely experience a lot of pain, a lot of frustration by finding that your competition is getting in early and is getting in the driver's seat and is monopolizing a lot of those 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decisions. As data center executives can learn from professional baseball managers with constructing their rosters responsibly in a balanced fashion, it may be time to rethink not just the players that are on your team, but the positions that they play on the field. And in order for your account executives and sales development reps to get the respect that they need to and the attention that they need to from a lot of prospects and clients, in a lot of cases, they need to show up looking a lot more like trusted advisors and subject matter experts and consultants. Am I telling you that you should immediately go in and do a find and replace on the job titles and your email signatures and LinkedIn profile and business cards? It's way, way more than that. But your prospects and clients should get the feeling during these sales interactions that it feels like they're engaging with someone from like a big four consulting firm, that it has the vibe of like engaging with EY or KPMG or PwC or Deloitte or something like that. So what do you do once you've thought through the team issues? Think about what you can do to connect the dots all together to make all of this happen between marketing and sales and customer success and product and potentially channel partnerships if you have an indirect channel partnerships model going on in your business. So you approach everything so go-to-market is approached as a team sport. Traditional data center companies tend to have a lot of silos where the marketers hang out together and the sales professionals hang out together and the customer success, the CS, and the account managers hang out together and product. And many times they live in 4 different silos and they don't spend a ton of time collaborating and aligning. And when this happens, it tends to create a lot of internal friction. There tends to be a lot of infighting, a lot of fighting over who deserves credit for what, and budget and fighting over budgets and resources and backstabbing. And this ends up creating a really, not just a lousy internal experience for your employees and your internal stakeholders, but it creates a lousy customer experience, a lousy CX as well. And in a highly competitive, globalized marketplace that we exist in today, your company can no longer afford to fall into this trap. So I would encourage you to think about constructing your team in such a way that everyone is playing for the same team, regardless of what position they play on their team. So on the front of their jerseys, it says your company name and go to market. And it's only when they turn around and you see the back of their jerseys that you can see which team they play on within go to market or what job function they take on within go to market, whether it's marketing, sales, product, customer success, channel partnerships, potentially. If your leadership team is creating a toxic environment where no one trusts each other, you have already lost. Educating and building trust is one of the most important functions that you're going to play going forward with your prospects and clients. And it is nearly impossible to be really good at getting your prospects and clients to trust you if your team members don't trust each other. Everyone on your team needs to be cheering, roaring, supporting each other for the same winning outcome. And the better job your leadership company, all the way at the C-level, can do in making this happen, the more rapidly, the more profitably you're going to grow, the more competitive you're going to be in the marketplace, and the more successful you're going to be at engendering very, very high levels of trust that are incredibly important for being successful in data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. So think about what you can do to connect the dots between marketing, sales, customer success, account management, and product so that you approach everything with your go-to-market as a team sport. It's also incredibly important to get on the radar screen as early as possible with the right buyers, with the right people, in the right places at the right time, and most of all, in the right context, so that you and your team and your company are seen as the definitive go-to experts in your space, where there's no doubt among anyone in the marketplace who they need to turn to when someone wants to learn about your category, not just when someone wants to buy in your category, but when they want to learn. Owning the learning is incredibly important. And this will cause, we'll talk a little bit more about this throughout Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart, but how you evaluate your competitive positioning may need to change. There's the obvious direct competitors that you bump into all the time. There's your indirect competitors where they may be in a slightly different geographic market, or they may be a lot bigger or a lot smaller. And then there's non-business model competitors. The non-business model competitors is what catches everyone off guard all the time. These are companies, organizations, individuals, associations, events, media companies, channel partner companies that want to reach the exact same buyer personas that you do. And you are in competition for those folks' eyeballs and attention and ears. And it is incredibly important that you recognize that the battle is fought long before that 83% point. And the battle is won many times, most of the time, long before that 83% point. It's not just about keeping you on the short list. It's that when you do an exceptionally good job at educating and build trust, you're nearly guaranteed to be on the short list, but many of your competitors will be eliminated from the short list because it'll become painfully obvious to the whole decision committee that no one's going to hold a candle to your expertise. It's really important to think too about the buyer's journey. This is the active research process that someone goes through between complete stranger and purchase decision. This is now a very self-driven process where nearly everything in awareness and consideration by default happens before someone is ready for sales contact, is ready for vendor contact. So early on, they know there's a big goal or a big challenge that they're trying to figure out in your category, and they tend to look for blogs and email newsletters and social posts and videos and podcasts. Toward the middle of that part of the buyer's journey, the consideration stage, they're starting to give your category a name. They still don't know your company exists, but they're starting to give your category a name, and they're starting to weigh the different kinds of approaches and the pros and cons of doing that. So buyer's guides, webinars, educational events are incredibly impactful at being able to stay with someone throughout awareness and consideration and building up that mind share. So they want to spend a lot of time with members of your client-facing team. That's an enormous unlock that so many companies are missing. They spend outrageous amounts of resources begging for meetings, when in reality, if you can position your client-facing team members to provide such exceptional educational value to your most important stakeholders, they will want to spend time with members of your sales team as opposed to the other way around. And by default, most companies are usually doing at least a passable job in the decision stage, but only showing up for the final 17% of the ballgame. What do you think would happen if you're not there for the first 7 or 8 innings of the baseball game, or the first 3 quarters of the football game, the basketball game, the soccer match? It's not going to be a pretty picture if you were completely absent from the field for the first 83% of the game, right? It's the same issue here. So it's super important to remember that during the awareness and the consideration stage, they simply have no idea that your category or even your company exists. How do we know what they care about during the awareness stage or the consideration stage, what their biggest goals and challenges are? Because we've done the homework, we've done the research to understand in their own words what their biggest goals and challenges are. Remember, they're not going to be ready for a conversation, at least a sales-related conversation, or booking a tour, or scheduling a needs assessment, or booking a free consultation, or whatever you want to call it, until they're most of the way through the buyer's journey. The unlock is showing up as the teacher and the consultant and the trusted advisor, the subject matter expert. If it comes across as salesy, you sell to educated buyers, right? You sell to highly cynical, educated buyers. They'll see through this stuff a mile away, and they don't want to have to put up with the way they used to buy 10 years ago because they don't have to anymore. Knowledge of your product, knowledge of your category tends to come much later on in the buyer's journey. But what they do know really early on is there's a huge goal they're trying to figure out that you could potentially help them close the gap on. And there's a huge stressor, there's a huge frustration, there's a huge challenge that they need to deal with because it's causing them a lot of sleepless nights. It's screwing up their work-life balance. It's annoying their loved ones when they're constantly getting interrupted during friends and family gatherings. It's messed up. It's destroyed the tranquility of more than one vacation they've been on. They got to deal with this. And the better job you can do of introducing them to a better way of dealing with this in an educational context early on in that buyer's journey, the more likely it is that you'll captivate their attention. It's all about helpful educational content. It's all about helpful educational events from the viewpoint, from the standpoint of the buyer persona in their exact own words, not what you want to sell them, but what they know that they care about. And this will give you a chance to build a strong, positive, trusted relationship with these strangers long before they are ready to make their purchase decision. This is the new battleground for getting on the radar of strangers in the right places at the right time, and most of all, in the right context. So far we talked about your sales process, we talked about your team connecting the dots and getting on the radar screen as early as possible with the right buyers. What else do you need to care about? How to plan, create, and distribute your content for maximum relevancy, maximum competitiveness across the most popular formats. And what I encourage you to be thinking about in 2025 and beyond is the video first versus the video last world. Think about how much online video you watch today compared to 10 years ago. How about 20 years ago, before YouTube, before Netflix, before streaming, when people used to get movies on those silver little Frisbees that we shoved in DVD players, right? You go back even before that, you'd have rewind fees, right? But think about how much we now live in a video-centric world as a way that educates and builds trust at scale, that accelerates buyers' journeys. And it could be long videos, it could be short videos, it could be micro content, it could be live videos, but we know that video content rules the roost in most cases. Does that mean that people don't consume image-based content or text? No, everyone has different preferences, and in many cases you want to check all of the boxes. But I would encourage you to think about a video first approach as opposed to a video last approach. The video last approach 10 years ago, it used to be really expensive, painful, time consuming to create video content. Those of you that were ever involved in a video content production for your company 10 years ago can likely attest to that firsthand. It was usually the last step in the process. And then it was finally embedded on a website page, a landing page, or blog post, or something similar. Today, we're now in a world where a lot of video creation can start with a video first approach as opposed to a video last approach, where this is the beginning of the communication process. And this allows you to get much closer to your subject matter experts because there's a lot of democratization that's happened with how this kind of content is created. It's now simpler for a lot of even non-professionals, a lot of non-video professionals to get involved in creating video content. Sure, there's always going to be a place for highly produced videos where there's an incredibly high leverage situation like a homepage explainer video that's going to be viewed by tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, or pre-prepared video content that's going to play at a massive industry conference where you've invested millions or hundreds of thousands in that conference, and it has to be absolutely positively perfect. But for 80 or 90% of the routine bread and butter kind of content you're creating on a regular basis, being of that video first mindset can make an enormous difference. And this gives you an opportunity to do what I call triple dipping, where one set of inputs can yield 3 or more sets of outputs. So by recording your video first with your subject matter expert, you can repurpose that video into audio, like for a podcast, so you get it out in front of Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Audible, all those bunch of different audio formats. And that can also be repurposed into text now easier than ever with all the great generative AI tools that we have available that help to accelerate a lot of that work, all from a single video shoot with one or more subject matter experts. So I would think carefully about what you can do with your content strategy for relevance, recency, for getting out there faster among the most popular formats, because your prospects and clients have really quite dramatically changed how they research and make purchase decisions. Again, 83% of this research is typically over before traditional sales teams get to meet their prospects, before they get to meet their best future clients. And that's just not a place where you can be competitive anymore, where you're completely shut out for 83% of the decision-making process. We need a better way to get you in there early and often when it matters most. Data center firms in and around this industry are, for the most part, completely underprepared for meeting this major once-in-a-generation change in purchase behavior. Many are still living in the past, spending most of their resources cold messaging, cold calling, cold in-mailing people on LinkedIn, begging for 15-minute meetings to do a product pitch. They don't realize that their most important buyer personas have changed dramatically and spend all their time learning from podcasts and watching streaming video and attending conferences and attending virtual conferences and webinars and live streaming events like this, and asking questions among their peers on social media and reading online reviews and asking questions all day long from Google and Siri and Alexa and Copilot and Gemini and Claude and Perplexity. And this is only going to accelerate. These changes, however, also provide enormous opportunities for go-to-market teams that are able to position themselves more as subject matter experts, consultants, teachers, trusted advisors, and some select members on your team may even rise all the way to the level of being seen as thought leaders. I would love to know what your biggest takeaway is so far from Data Center Go-to-Market 101. Please let us know in the chat pane. So far, we're getting customers to consider products, not having people phone us back, finding qualified prospects, targeting the right people, connecting with the right decision makers. So if you have any questions on what we've talked about so far with Data Center Go-to-Market 101, please use the questions feature in the Zoom software. We have a very active chat going on right now. Usually when I host webinars, I'm kind of indifferent between whether the questions go in the chat pane or whether they go in Q&A. But because we have such an active chat pane, please make sure to use the Q&A feature. And as we, as time permitting during the 3-day training event, we'll try to get to as many of those questions as possible. We also have some special treats, some special bonuses that I want to introduce you to for giving you some additional insight on what's going on in the data center ecosystem. During these section breaks, I'm actually going to pull in some specially selected excerpts from recent data center go-to-market podcast episodes. And the first two are going to come from Patricia Pat Alvina, who is a sales manager for Siemens in ASEAN in Singapore. And she's going to talk with you for a few minutes about the future of sales in data center and digital infrastructure. And then in the section break, we're also going to introduce you to John Clayton, who is an enterprise account manager with Blancco Technology Group. They specialize in the category of IT asset disposition and secure data erasure, specifically within Siemens is very focused on data center facilities. Blancco is very focused on data center technology. And John's going to share some tips with you on the future of enterprise account managers in and around data centers. So feel free to share your takeaways in the chat pane about what you learned from Patricia and what you learned from John. Feel free to share your questions in the question pane. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to John and Patricia.
Hi, I'm Patricia Alvina from Siemens Singapore. I'm part of the energy performance and sustainability teams, and welcome to Data Center Go-to-Market podcast.
If you were to look into your crystal ball and think ahead 2, 4, maybe 5 years out from now, how do you see the role of sales professionals in and around data centers and digital infrastructure, specifically that deal with energy and facilities, changing in the coming years?
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe the sales will be sales. You still have to turn leads into opportunities into a deal, into a project. So there still be the function of sales. But the things that we have to understand is that the consumer will get smarter and smarter as the internet will become more available for everybody, especially in Singapore, where we have the ideal situation of information flow. What I'm saying that is that if, let's say, you say something to a person, a company A today, likely that they will, company B, C, and D might heard about the same thing next week. So maybe I'm exaggerating here, but that's what I mean by perfect information flow. So the consumer is very highly educated, so they may not need to read more brochures. Like we don't need to read them brochures, but we need to understand what is the challenge they have behind the question they ask. Because sometimes they listen to information, the YouTube and the internet. They understand that it's the product, but how can this product address the challenge? So this could be a lot of listening skill requires, to active listening to understand what is the problem, and try to address that issues by understanding what is the challenge at hand, what they have done to address the challenge, and what do they feel about it, about the solution they have. They might have done it, they have already have a solution in mind. They might have tried it, so if you just straight away selling the product, then you will not hear about all this stuff. So you want to hear what they say first, and what they have done to address the problem, and how happy they are with the solution. If they're not happy, why they are not happy. If they are not happy, have they done something about it? So keep asking kind of why and why and why, and try to learn more about the challenge they have beforehand, and the things they have done before you start selling your solutions. So that's probably my opinion of what could be the future of sales professional will look like for data center.
And that reinforces a theme that I'm hearing a lot in these interviews, is that as the self-propelled buyer's journey becomes the dominant buyer's journey, and this Gartner put out some research a couple of years ago that said that 83% of a typical buyer's journey is over before vendor contact, or before they're willing to talk with someone from your sales team. As that continues to get pushed to the right, and their people are doing more and more education before they get to you, the bar is being so raised up for you and members of your team that they're just consuming so much content. And by the time they get to you, their expectations are so next level on what you need to bring to the table that it becomes increasingly difficult to stay 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of the prospects and clients to add value. And I guess this is where it becomes a challenge for a company like Siemens and for sales leaders to continue to provide the training to their team members so that they can add value that's exponentially greater than the surface level knowledge that their prospects and clients bring to the table through self-research.
Yeah, well, indeed, you're right. But we have a really, I would say Siemens is a good company. We have a lot of trainings program here to upskill ourselves, to reach out to the network. We have access to the LinkedIn platform, premium and sales navigators. So it's really good tools to understand about your market and be prepared before you meet your client. I think that's the homework you have to do before you meet anybody. I'm sure you've done a lot of homework about me as well before this interview.
Yeah, I mean, it's table stakes to now go in before anyone goes into any meeting. It's expected that you spend at least a few minutes looking at the LinkedIn profiles. And if there's multiple stakeholders, because you're fortunate enough to be meeting with the decision committee, of course, a few minutes learning about the different perspectives of individual stakeholders. And usually what ends up happening is you have one person, either their internal champion or your initial foot in the door, that can sometimes give you the lay of the land a little bit. But yeah, the tools, now that these tools exist, there's really no excuse for people to go in cold anymore. Always in CRMs too, provide a tremendous amount of detail on the kind of content that people have consumed, videos they've watched, webinars they've attended, blogs they've read, and just it's getting to the point where it used to give you a competitive advantage to do this kind of research 10 years ago. I think you're actually at a massive disadvantage now relative to other companies that approach this space if this isn't part of your overall toolkit.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine like if I have to do sales 10 years ago without all these tools, like how do you know your people? How do you know what they're thinking about? What is their concern? So you have to really explain everything from scratch, and to use the word they use. Now we have LinkedIn to understand like how they phrase their posts, what are the terms they're looking at, but without that, then okay, you really takes time to get to know your clients, So, and but I guess that's the benefit of internet today. So information flow faster, and the more dynamics in the economy.
Yeah, it's amazing in less than 20 years how much of a major part of B2B selling that LinkedIn has become. It's sometimes easy to forget how that it's only been, I think I got on LinkedIn in 2008. I think it was around for 3 or 4 years before that, but yeah, it really only hit mainstream adoption tipping point maybe in the mid 2010s. And yeah, it's to the point now where I sometimes talk with people and they're like, I don't have time to get good at social media. I'm like, you don't have to get good at all social media. Just pay attention to the one that matters the most, where your prospects and clients are, and of course do your homework to validate it, but you're almost certainly going to find that LinkedIn is the place that needs people's attention, both for their own personal brand and as a tool to build rapport and learn more about what their prospects and clients need.
Yeah, I agree with you completely.
John Clayton from Blancco Technology Group. You're watching the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast.
Turning to another topic on a more tactical level with what you do on a day-to-day basis for Blancco in growing awareness and your work as an enterprise account manager, what do you think the future of sales looks like in the data center industry over the next 2+ years? What do you think is going to change? What do you think is going to stay the same?
I think we've already seen a massive change within the market in the last 5-10 years. In the last 10 years, as we stated previously, everything used to be on-prem. Everything was previously on-prem. People wanted to have servers, SAN, storage arrays, everything like that on site, everything like that. Over the last 5 years, we've seen I've seen a much larger change, especially within the UK market, towards a more virtualized data center approach. So with AWS, etc. And I think that we're going to see much more of a hybrid approach to the data centers as we move forward in terms of that. The reality is that data's still got to go somewhere. And with the amount of data that there is growing exponentially, data being fed into the cloud seems more realistic rather than having it on-prem. However, as is always the way, there's always going to be a cost involved. And with more data becomes more virtual machines, and more virtual machines becomes more expense. I guess from a day-to-day Blancco perspective, we're very lucky in that we've got virtualized infrastructure or solutions for virtualized infrastructure. So we still offer the ability to do a virtual machine erasure, for instance, or file erasure, because there's still going to be that need for our solutions within that environment. But I think what you'll potentially see in the next few years with the physical infrastructure is that there will still be an element of physical infrastructure. You'll still see servers and storage arrays, but it will be a much more of a hybrid approach rather than purely on-prem. There'll still be some servers and stuff because of the security aspect, but I'd hope to see that it would go towards a more virtualized environment moving forward.
So wasn't that great? I am so glad that I was able to share perspective from Patricia, Alvina from Siemens, and from John Clayton from Blancco Technologies. And what's super interesting, not just about the global nature of what they do, Patricia's based in Singapore and John is based in England, is that they both brought some really interesting backgrounds before they got into sales in and around data centers. Patricia has graduate degrees in energy and sustainability management, which is incredibly impactful for the work she does at trying to cause transformation among enterprises and data center operators all over Southeast Asia by being able to be the true subject matter and the true consultants, not just walking the walk. She's also exceptionally good at social selling. We talk a lot about that in the full interview. John Clayton also brings a really interesting background as well. He's been at Blancco for several years, but before that, he was a business analyst by background. So again, another type of professional resume experience that would be incredibly valuable to the kinds of technology and transformation and digital executives that he works with on initiatives around a lot of what Blancco is all about is trying to keep hardware out of landfills, helping to promote secure data erasure on servers and just hardware in general to give that a second life. I've actually had some really good interviews on the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast on a number of companies that work on similar kinds of initiatives, trying to keep to promote hardware reuse. So there's a whole series of interviews too around sustainability. We've talked about heat reuse, how to take the heat that's generated from data centers and make that a positive social good in communities. So again, that was Patricia, Alvina from Siemens, John Clayton from Blancco Technology Group. And if you have some of your favorite takeaways from Patricia and John that you'd like to share in the chat pane, please feel free as well. Like I mentioned before, try to keep, if you have specific questions, please try to place them in the Q&A feature in Zoom and keep the chat pane open for the structured conversation that we're having during Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart. So next up, we're going to be going into data center sales has changed. And is your team living in the past? How to figure out if your team is living in the past. And again, when I talk about this topic, the kinds of challenges that I hear most about are struggles with reaching decision makers, connecting with the right decision maker, branding and messaging, and finding effective sales channels. What is your biggest sales challenge? We'd love to know. Please share that in the chat pane. So in terms of data center sales has changed, we're going to first start talking about how to prepare for today's data center leads, what you can do to help your data center sales teams better prioritize, and what we can do to reinvent data center professionals to thrive in the AI era, where we're a much more digitally focused world. In order to set some context, in order to level set and make sure that we're on the same page, I think it's instructive to take a few moments and stroll back on memory lane back to the early 2010s when buyers were, they didn't know it at the time, but compared to today, they were relatively uninformed. There was a relatively linear buyer's journey, and the early stage playbook was overwhelmingly overwhelmingly centered on cold prospecting and brand type of ads. We live in a very different world today where we're seeing massive amounts of upgrades happening across the data center ecosystem. We're seeing a lot of sustainability constraints, especially power grid capacity happening, as well as a number of sustainability related directives throughout Europe. But we're also seeing a lot of growth opportunity. How do sales teams participate in all of this? In Web 1.0, Web 2.0, and ChatGPT, we have seen over the last couple of years that these buyer behaviors have changed. Now, your prospects and clients now come to your initial meetings having an overwhelming amount of knowledge about your particular category. This really levels up, it changes the game on how to staff your sales teams, who to hire, what kind of professional development, what kind of cross-training, what kind of upskilling needs to happen so that your BDRs, your SDRs, your AEs can continue to add significant incremental value so your prospects and clients are motivated to want to spend time with members of your client-facing team. They have this instant product research capability. They have instant comparisons, in many cases on commoditized products and services. And you'll hear about this as I loop in some of the experts in some of these additional segments throughout Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart. In terms of commoditized products and services, sales professionals are already starting to get elbowed out of the way. So what can we do to make sure that you stay relevant to a world where now 83% of researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing by default happens without you if you don't take the steps to show up as a teacher, a consultant, a subject matter expert, or a trusted advisor? I think it's also really helpful too to think about when we try to look at your positioning, what are some trustworthy and some less trustworthy professions? Actually, it would be really helpful if you could drop into the chat pane and let me know what you think the most trustworthy professions are. Because when we pulled this research together using Copilot, and they got data from Statista and WebMD and Yale and Newsweek, things that showed up really trustworthy came to be like police officers, pharmacists, grade school teachers. It was interesting that that showed up even more trustworthy than secondary school teachers, doctors. What are some of the less trustworthy professions in the U.S.? Members of Congress. We're not going to get into the political pros and cons of that, but on surveys, they have not shown up high on the list of trustworthy. Car salespeople. You want to significantly raise the bar if you want to do better in that category. Journalists, advertising executives, business executives. And the professions can be a little bit of overgeneralizing, but it's really, really important to think about how you want to position your sales team to show up as educators and trust builders, which is likely one of the most important functions of your entire client-facing team going forward, especially your sales development reps and your account executives, educators and trust builders. What can we do? Billy Joel said this, right, decades ago, right? It's always been a matter of trust. It's always been a matter of trust, right? So great educational content, great educational events not only cause trust to transfer and spread not only to key stakeholders, but among other stakeholders on the decision committee. It can have a really transformative impact on your short-term, intermediate-term, and long-term sales goals. Essentially, what you're looking for with most of these interactions is to have a two-pronged visceral emotional reaction of like, wow, that was super helpful. What else do they have to say? And when you get that second part, what else do they have to say? That's when your prospects and clients are hanging around long enough for you to build a really good, solid relationship with them over an extended period of time. Because again, in a world where there's typically 28 touch points throughout their buyer's journey, throughout the sales cycle, the more of those touch points that you can be in on in a regular basis, the stronger that trust is going to be, the more likely it is that there's going to be very natural opportunities for you to meet the rest of the decision committee. So by the time they're finally ready to buy, in many cases, it's a slam dunk that not only your company is on the short list, but in many cases, your fantastic value that you've provided through your educational resources and educational events have neutralized most of your, perhaps all of your competitors. The challenge is how to get access to prospects in the awareness and consideration stage in an environment where now so many of your prospects and clients have become increasingly allergic to spending time with members of your sales team, especially in the early and middle parts of the buyer's journey. And again, it didn't used to be this way. 10 years ago, your sales professionals, your account executives, your BDRs, your SDRs could count on meeting most prospects when they were still in that consideration stage, when they still had an opportunity in these one-on-one conversations to shape the buying criteria. Now, not so much anymore. It is really an uphill battle to get back in there, which is why it's incredibly important to think about how we position your sales team going forward. You may have ignored a lot of these trends for years, but data center innovators have been investing in these kinds of initiatives for years. This is something I talk about quite frequently on the podcast. And there's certainly segments within the data center industry, within digital infrastructure, within critical facilities that have been way more aggressive than others. But just for example, like Equinix has been doing a fantastic job with downloadable premium content and blogs and email marketing and social and educational events for the better part of a decade. Huge, one of the top data center operators on the planet. TierPoint, same deal. They've been investing in all of these kinds of initiatives for the better part of a decade. DataBank as well. You go to the resource center and you find dozens, if not hundreds, of great educational resources. And these aren't new initiatives. These have been going on for the better part of, if you think about YouTube, really started to grow, accelerate when it was acquired by Google, now Alphabet, in, what was it, 2008. LinkedIn also started to really accelerate around that same time. Webinars, streaming video also. So a lot of the being an early adopter, you're not an early adopter, you're not a mid-range adopter at this point. If you're just getting started on these kinds of initiatives, this isn't time to put your pinky toe in the shallow end of the pool. There is significant catch-up that you're going to need to make to be competitive, because so many dozens, so many hundreds of significant players in data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities have been knocking it out of the park with these kinds of initiatives, with these kinds of investments for the better part of the decade. So what can we do to rethink how your sales teams prioritize? What's important to think about? I want you to consider how your own purchase preferences have changed recently. Think about how you now deal with these kinds of issues. Like when you order from Amazon and you have a question about buying something, do you fill out a form and wait a couple days for someone to maybe get back to you with the answer to that question? Heck no, right? When you're ordering from DoorDash or Instacart, and you need service, do you ever hear elevator music anymore? And when you're looking to book a ride on Lyft or Uber, how many days, how many hours do you have to wait for a price quote? I remember 20, 25 years ago, back when I was still in the SMB fractional CTO business, we would every once in a while do some work with like limo companies. And there was a whole sales function of receiving quotes, scheduling time to talk about quotes, sending these things back out. And the goal was to be able to turn those things around in the same day. Can you imagine someone booking a Lyft or an Uber waiting 4, 6, or 8 hours anymore for a response on how much it was going to cost to take them to the airport or pick them up at the airport and take them downtown? People's expectations, how we research and make purchase decisions, have changed in a really profound way. And we don't really need to work very hard to do that research anymore. Hey, Google, what's the difference between, hey, Siri, hey, Alexa, what does this cost? Or who's the best company in this particular category in our area? And we used to have to click through on a lot of those little blue links. And we now know with generative AI and large language models and Copilot and ChatGPT and Perplexity, and Bing Copilot, Gemini, Claude, we know all of those are aggregating all of that stuff. And you have this whole emergence, AI essentials. You have this whole emergence of these clickless search results, which throws a monkey wrench in a lot of companies' legacy search engine optimization, legacy SEO investments. Along comes the generative AI chatbots, and it's all changed. So the question is, what are you going to do about this going forward so that your sales professionals can actually provide significant value in a world where a first mover is almost always going to go to the bots? Or just simply, let me post a question on Slack or ask my friends and colleagues on LinkedIn what they think, because they trust their friends and their coworkers more than they trust the sales profession. A lot of this can be predicted by looking first at what people's personal habits are on the business and consumer side before people bring these habits into the workplace on the business to business sides. The habits we first discover in our personal lives will almost always transfer into our professional lives. As mentioned earlier, if you can be successful at getting your client-facing team members, especially on your sales team, especially your account managers, especially your channel managers, to provide so much value that your prospects and your clients, those stakeholders, feel like they're interacting with someone from a Big Four firm like Deloitte, EY, PwC, KPMG, or something like that, you are starting to win the battle. If this concept is completely foreign to you and you're still showing up as a vendor trying to pitch a product or a service at the lowest possible price, it's going to be a really, really uphill battle, because the sales strategy shift is really, really well underway already. This isn't coming. This is already here. It's not a matter of getting your team better at selling. It's a matter of getting your sales team better at guiding prospects through their buyer's journey. It should feel, especially in enterprise sales, like you're more like the quarterback or a project manager, helping your internal champion drive alignment across multiple teams within their company. How do you know who the key stakeholders are? How do you know who the team members are? Because increasingly, you're going to see Sales teams specialize by geography, specialize by company size, specialize by industry. So when they have a target account list of a couple dozen or a couple hundred companies, they know when they talk to an IT infrastructure engineer or a CTO or CFO of a mid-market manufacturing company located in the Midwestern US or Singapore or Northern England or Australia, wherever it is, they know by pattern recognition for that kind of company who are the key players that are involved as the primary and the secondary buyer persona. And what do they want to know step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, way beyond the initial step, so you can anticipate what they want to learn next, proactively guide them in that direction so you're seen as incredibly helpful by helping to introduce them to how other people in similar roles in similar companies have navigated this journey. But that will also result in massive amounts of sales cycle acceleration because you're cutting out so much friction. So again, it's about your sales executives showing up as teachers, subject matter experts, trusted advisors. It's also super important in this kind of environment to recognize that fit, whether it's marginal fit or perfect fit or bullseye right in the center, perfect fit are all like on a spectrum. You really can no longer afford to have your salespeople getting sales closed at all costs, because we know not only is it a train wreck for your account managers to try to fix things post-purchase, but it can also cause a lot of reputational damage along the way, which can cause a lot of financial forecasts and things to be completely thrown a huge monkey wrench in the whole process. So your sales team going forward is going to need tools and training to recognize whether a particular lead is a perfect fit, a marginal fit, or a really bad fit with alarm bells ringing. So what can we do to reinvent your sales team so that they are seen in this context so they can be successful going forward and thriving in the AI era, being seen more as Big Four consultants and thought leaders and expert advisors? For a long time, people have recognized the whole idea of consultative selling and the doctor-patient relationship. We're now well past the place where your sales professionals are gatekeepers of information. Any information that you're locking up and refusing to put out there on your website, people are going to find a way to steer around that. There's just so many other ways for them to get that information. Search engines, crowdsourced review sites, social media, and especially the chatbots have really won that battle. So we need to figure out a way to get your sales team out of the vendor box and help them stay out of the vendor box for good. So personalized videos can certainly help with this. Looking at the context on a CRM timeline can help anticipate and accelerate processes. Making sure that your sales team members are super comfortable being on video and educating and building trust in the way that modern buyers demand that you educate and build trust, and getting smarter about social selling. So you're not just copying and pasting and repeating a lot of selfish content on your LinkedIn feed, but are truly engaging in a way so that your most important stakeholders see your sales team members as industry experts at what they do. At the absolute minimum table stakes, when you're going into a meeting, you should know like how they found your company, what topics attracted their interest, webinars they attended, what they're interested in at the webinars, videos, how other stakeholders within the company are interacting with your content. And again, these tools have existed for the better part of a decade now. If you're not spending a few minutes studying a CRM contact timeline, having great integration between your marketing and sales technology tools, having access to LinkedIn, Sales Navigator, being able to figure out not only what's going on with that individual, but within the whole account, these are table stakes to even be remotely competitive in the 2020s and beyond. But we really, if we're going to do this the right way, your client-facing team members, especially your account executives and sales development reps, really need to be the consummate consumers of your company's thought leadership. You can't afford to have your prospects and clients showing up to your meetings, knowing more about your thought leadership, being better educated on your blogs and your webinars and your downloadables and your videos and your podcasts than your own internal team members. So again, this levels up on what it means to upskill and professional development and keep everyone up to speed. But the last thing in the world you want is for a prospecting client to show up knowing your content better than your own team members know your content. This is a huge part of educating and building trust with prospects. And even for your entry-level talent. Traditionally, sales development reps have been the entry-level place where people go. And sales professionals, there's a role for them as well. It's just they're going to look more like tour guides and concierges, more like subject matter experts and trusted advisors. And over time, that can actually change quite a bit. We'll talk throughout Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart about some other content and educational events related roles too, where SDRs and BDRs can play a big place. So I would encourage your sales professionals that are truly focused on being seen in a positive light with your prospects and clients going forward. And again, we're going to have some special guest segments that help to reinforce this. It's incredibly important that you're providing so much value that you are seen like a consultant and a thought leader and a subject matter expert. For a number of people that I've talked to that work at some of the large data center operators, they're more seasoned sales professionals, have leveled up their IT knowledge, so they're able to have these conversations with IT executives that rival the kind of conversations that they would have with a fractional CTO for a small and medium-sized business. They're like 80% of the way there to if they left their job next week and decided to hang up their shingle as a managed service provider or an outsourced CTO to small and medium-sized businesses, their technical knowledge would be most of the way there already. And it that bar didn't need to be that high 5 or 10 years ago, but to stay relevant, it has definitely moved to that level. So let's talk about specialization of roles within data centers as well, because depending on your business model, depending on your target audience, it can make a big difference with who would be likely the best fit for owning these relationships, depending on whether you're selling to small and medium-sized businesses, like a $20,000 or your local currency equivalent to a small and medium-sized business, like a cloud deal to a small business owner, or whether you're selling like $100,000 or your local currency equivalent to a mid-market, like for a co-location deal where you might be selling to a mid-market CFO, or whether you're selling true seven-figure deals to enterprise Fortune 500 kind of companies or division directors. It can make an enormous difference as to who's the best fit for this. And it really will dramatically impact how you go about hiring and how you go about roles assignment, how you go about cross-training, building these teams among sales development, account executives, and customer success or account managers. There also can be, in this kind of context, some really big dangers in burying your marketing team under sales, as it often is in very traditional rear-looking, backward-looking, living in the past kinds of organizations. I was just talking with a data center recruiter about this a week or two ago, and it never occurred to them that that could be one of the roadblocks that's holding their company back for growth. The reality is, when it comes to most data center go-to-market needs, it's not just the sales team that needs educational content and great educational events. Your account managers, your customer success managers also need fantastic content that helps with onboarding and getting newly onboarded clients to initial value, intended value, and extended value. They need great content. They need great explainer videos. They need great educational events. Your product managers, their first cousin, the product marketers, also need fantastic educational content for the self-driven buyer's journey and to help staff up the sales team and to help staff up both sides of the channel partnership, as is your channel partnership. If you have an indirect sales organization, you'll need great educational content, great educational events for attracting potential partners. And then you'll also need channel activation, channel enablement materials for onboarding and continuing to get your channel partners trained up in the same way that you would train up your internal service and success and sales team members. And it's very difficult for marketers to do that if they're 100% focused on the sales team and getting deals closed in the next couple of weeks, as opposed to making more strategic bets. Your buyers no longer want to buy your services the way, your products and services, likely the way that you're currently marketing and selling them, unless everything that we've talked about today so far, you're like, oh yeah, we've been doing this for years. If that's not the case, and this is still relatively new, there's a really good chance that there's a disconnect between how you're marketing and selling and how your buyers, how your prospects want to buy. What are some of the forces that are accelerating this? Globalization. It's no accident that the guest experts that I'm bringing into Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart are literally from all over the globe. I'm based in the US. So far, you've heard from a sales leader in Singapore and a sales leader in the UK. You'll be hearing from literally all over the planet, from all over the data center ecosystem throughout this series. A lot of companies are facing commoditization, where there's more competitive pressures than ever, and a lot of technology-driven disruption. One of the things that's going on with a lot of operators that's flying under the radar screen is where they can get access to cost-effective power, where there's still power supply available for them to continue building in a world that's continuing to be power constrained. So if you want to make sure that your marketing team can support the full go-to-market team and not just be glorified sales helpers, make sure that they're not seen as gophers and just order takers. They can really only be an unlock for your whole business as a whole when they can work on the customer experience and reducing friction and having the autonomy and the resources to get meaningful projects and initiatives done throughout the full go-to-market team. When we think about the impact of thought leadership, LinkedIn has done some research recently with this, with PR giant Edelman, and found that thought leadership remains critical to customer engagement, but breaking through the noise is harder than ever. 83% of decisions researching, comparing, and ranking options and evaluating pricing happened long before people are ready for a sales context. All of this thought leadership is key to in earning trust and credibility among decision makers. The question is your company prepared to compete and win in today's data center marketplace? Ultimately, the choice is yours. So that brings us to the end of our segment on data center sales has changed. Is your team living in the past? And I would love to know what your takeaway, your biggest takeaway is from data center sales has changed. Is your company living in the past? Please share that in the chat pane in Zoom. If you have a specific question that's not directly related to that for us to potentially address in the Q&A session towards the end of today, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom. Normally, it doesn't matter a lot to me whether you're placing questions in chat or Q&A, but I'd appreciate if you could keep your questions in the Q&A feature to help keep those organized. If you have any questions on what we've talked about so far on Data Center Go-to-Market 101 or Data Center Sales has Changed, feel free to drop those into the Q&A pane, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible during the later part of today's Day 1 session. So as mentioned earlier, we have a couple of special treats. I'm also going to be introducing you to two additional resources, two additional sales and marketing leaders throughout the data center ecosystem. Data Center David Rapoport, who's Chief Business Development Officer of ASOTO. They specialize in battery and energy storage management capabilities. David's also a longtime veteran of data center technology and data center operators. And David's going to talk for a few minutes about the changing role of a Chief Business Development Officer in power generation and energy storage. And then I'm also going to share a few minutes with you from the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast interview with Viggy Hegde, who is a longtime veteran of the data center industry with like 15 years experience with some of the largest data center operators in the space, Flexential and Raging Wire, and it's now known as NTT Global Data Centers. And he now is Vice President of Marketing at Compu Dynamics, a design build specialist firm based in Northern Virginia in Data Center Alley. And Viggy's going to talk with you briefly about the future of data center marketing, staying current and highly visible while proactively educating communities. And while we listen to that together, I would encourage you to share your favorite takeaways in the chat pane, just as you did when we were listening to Patricia, Alvina, and John Clayton earlier. So with that, David, take it away.
Hi, it's David Rapoport, and you are watching Data Center Go-to-Market podcast.
I want to spend a little bit of time to learn a little bit more about what your daily routine, your weekly routine, monthly routine is like being a Chief Business Development Officer in this space, and in particular, how you think this might change over the next few years as buyer preferences seem to evolve more towards self-service. So kind of thinking ahead in your crystal ball, what does this role look like, leading sales, leading marketing for a company in your space 2, 3, 4 years out from now?
Yeah. So my daily or weekly routine is at least few days we meet with the team at the office, meetings, planning, working on, providing solutions for our customers. Almost every week I spend on traveling 2-3 days, customer meetings. We ASOTO as a company, we're experiencing tremendous growth this year, and we have a lot of requests from the customers, and it accelerates. So our team is growing, but on the other hand, we are starting to use more and more digital tools in order to make our team more efficient and take out the routine work from the human and leave for the humans or for the sales and marketing people the creative tasks or human to human negotiations, high level negotiations, while digital tools or AI could help with a daily routine that in the past managers spent a lot of time on that, and the teams needed to be much larger in the past than we have now. So efficiency, I think, comparing to what I started when I started my career, we are at least 2-3 times more efficient in terms of what one team member can do in specific time frame.
Hi, I'm Viggy Hegde. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Compu Dynamics. I live in Northern Virginia, the Data Center Alley. You're watching Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. Thanks for watching.
Viggy, when you think about where this profession is headed in the coming years, if you look into your crystal ball 2, 3, 4 years out, how do you think the role of a marketer or marketing team supporting different kinds of internal and external stakeholders is going to change in the coming years?
Man, it's a $1 million question, because this industry, it's changing so rapidly. It's because it's so hard to even predict what it's going to be, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, let alone in the future, like 10 years down the line, right? It's almost impossible because generative AI, as an example, is taking over. It's literally happening, and if you haven't embraced it, you're falling behind, right? So our industry in general, it's fundamentally, that's where data center is right in the middle of making it all happen. There's generative AI or the big data analytics, everything that we are talking about, autonomous cars as an example, right? And it's very kind of hard to predict at this stage about what this industry is going to be 5 years down the line. But as marketers, one thing is for sure: if we are doing the same thing that we are doing 10 years ago, it's not going to work in the future. Because ultimately, two things are kind of fundamentally driving the market demand. One is the change in this overall ecosystem. Number two, the growth in the market. When I say growth, I'm talking about expansion into area that we never thought is going to be a data center market, right? So having that visibility and staying, very well versed with, how things are changing, that's fundamentally the secret sauce for any marketing professional, right? They need to know where the industry is going. They need to know where the constraints are. They need to know what our end users are looking for today, tomorrow, and 5 years down the line. And start to kind of, tune your marketing efforts in that direction so that, you're filling up your top of the funnel to educate the community that's looking for your solution. And then when they are in the market to buy your solution, you're already, ahead of the curve. You already engaged with them. You already kind of established your awareness, and you already told the market what you are capable of doing, right? So when the buyers are ready to buy, boom, you're right in front of them. So that's fundamentally the major shift of what we have done in the past versus what we should be doing in the future.
So 10 years ago, it may have been a nice to have to arrive super early and to plant the seeds and help frame the criteria that they use to evaluate all the other options and continue to stay with them. Now it seems like if you don't do that, you're really at a huge disadvantage. You probably won't be on the short list at all and may put yourself in a place where you're shrinking market share, losing deals, and the only way that things are closing at all is by having to sacrifice margin, which is a downward financial spiral for morale and the whole company's financial health and viability.
Exactly. And if you try to say your data center is AI ready today, you are late to the game, right? Because the revolution has already started, it's already in motion, right? So if you start saying, yeah, my data center is AI ready, or we are building AI ready data center, you are far behind. So that's just as an example.
Yeah, it's the same way I sometimes have people come to me and they're like, we'll get to LinkedIn and we'll get to doing all webinars and things like that. We're going to do that next year. I'm like, you really don't have time to keep kicking this down the field, because everyone that you compete against in this space, even the late adopters have been at this 5 or 10 years. The early adopters have been at LinkedIn and YouTube and webinars for at least 10 years at this point.
That's correct. Yeah, exactly.
It's all part of the competitive playbook. So that was David Rapoport from ASOTO. David's based in Latvia. ASOTO is based in Luxembourg. He sells all over Europe. Viggy Hegde is based in Northern Virginia, Data Center Alley, where we know we have the highest concentration of data centers on the planet. I'd be really curious to know what your biggest takeaways are that you learned from David and Viggy. Come from operator and technology and now construction, design, build related backgrounds in the data center ecosystem. So please let us know in the chat pane what your biggest takeaways are from David Rapoport and Viggy Hegde. So far we talked about data center go-to-market 101. We just went through the module, the segment on data center sales has changed as your team living in the past. And as we head down the home stretch on the final segment for day one of data center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart, we'll be talking about how to market and sell to CTOs and CIOs, Chief Technology Officers and Chief Information Officers, from the standpoint of data center go-to-market professionals. And when I talk about this topic, what people are usually most curious about and they struggle with the most is finding the right contact, engaging decision makers, how to deal with lead generation among CTOs and CIOs, having a compelling value proposition, understanding the budgeting process for new data center projects, and convincing customers, especially hyperscalers, to give up on their self-construction aspirations. What's the biggest marketing challenge that you're facing when it comes to marketing and selling to CTOs and CIOs? Please let us know in the chat pane. So when it comes to how to market and sell to CIOs, first we're going to talk about how to get up to speed on the state of CTOs and CIOs and what the environment looks like, how to prepare your team across the full go-to-market, especially within marketing and sales, for meeting with today's buyers. And then we're going to talk about how to engage with CTO, CIO, Oscar, the CTO, CIO, Oscar buyer persona. And then we'll introduce you to some recommended resources. So the role of the CTO, at least how MAT defines it, is besides making critical decisions along with company leaders, a CTO develops policies regarding IT to help the organizations run smoothly. A well-versed CTO is good at road mapping, development, innovation, leadership, strategic planning, AI, that's a huge area, machine learning, cloud, DevOps, and budgeting, among other skills and technologies. What's the difference, however, between a CTO and a CIO? In some companies, it may be semantics, it may be splitting hairs. In other companies, there's some very concrete drawing line in the sand kind of delineations between the two different job functions. At least from when TechTarget has looked at this at scale, they found that mid-sized to large companies with higher executive budgets, greater executive budgets, have both a CIO and a CTO. In other words, they found that the CTO is usually more widespread, more pervasive, and companies that have a larger budget will also hire a CIO, a Chief Information Officer, as a supplement. Both of those will focus on engineering, implementation, development, and management of tech. The big difference between the CTO and CIO, typically the CIO is hired to work on internal projects, where the CTO will focus more on external projects, internal stakeholders versus external stakeholders. The CTO project will often, the CTO role, the job function will often overlap with other jobs in particular, like the CIO or sometimes a chief science officer, depending on the nature of the business model, where they're located and the focus. The CTO may also get involved with infrastructure, which is a huge part of the digital infrastructure data center space, and act as a strategic planner or customer relations person. Again, this will all vary by organization, but there's some common threads that you'll see across different kinds of companies, across different kinds of industries, and across different geographies. The CTO will almost always report to a CEO. Every once in a while, you'll see instances where a CTO will report to a finance C-level person, where CTO reports to a CFO. Sometimes a CIO will report directly to the CEO. Sometimes it will be placed underneath and report directly to a CTO. And just as we talked about the implications of burying marketing at a lower level in the org chart than sales and product and account management and channel partnerships, there definitely are implications with putting one type of technology executive in a higher place in the hierarchy in the org chart than others. So that can also give you a lot of clues as to what's driving these kinds of things. What's interesting, however, across the board is increasingly some of these hyperscale deals have gotten so huge that historically the CTO was the final decision maker on hyperscale deals. Not so much anymore. On these massive deals, these massive 8-figure deals, the CTO is sitting at the table as a stakeholder, but a lot of times the deals are being negotiated now by a CEO, a CFO, and board members. So when it comes to like the relative popularity of people searching for CTOs and CIOs online, here's a quick look at Google Trends, at least in the US over the last couple of years. And you can see that the CIO job title was actually searched more often than the CTO job title. And the acronyms are searched way more than the full words. CTOs are really busy, and their job responsibilities, the stress and everything that's on their plate aligns pretty closely with salaries. It's not uncommon to find CTOs among the highest paid executives in an organization, depending on who you ask, whether Glassdoor, Salary, Indeed, or ZipRecruiter. You can find average CTO salaries in the US of anywhere from $166,000 up to well over $300,000 a year. CIO salaries, again, depending on who you ask, at least in the US, can range anywhere from $124,000 up to $330,000, depending on whether you're looking at Indeed, Salary.com, ZipRecruiter, or a Glassdoor. In terms of what their top priorities are for CIOs, the more internally facing team members, internally facing leaders, the CIO.com found that they are focused on resiliency, improving business intimacy and alignment, rationalizing the technology estate, aligning on business goals, monetizing data. That's been a huge issue for a number of years, and that has even bigger challenges in the European Union. It has different meanings, monetizing data, depending on where you're actually located, because there's a lot of regulatory issues that come up when it comes to data, especially within information technology, leading the charge on digital transformation, modernizing cybersecurity defenses, and preparing to do more with less. In terms of investments in data analytics and AI, Joe McKendrick, longtime columnist for Forbes, found that most CIOs believe their role is becoming more digital and more innovation focused. You'll see a lot of companies in and around the data center ecosystem where it's becoming increasingly common to see a chief innovation officer in addition to a chief technology officer. If they have a chief information officer and a chief innovation officer, then you got a problem with your acronyms because you have two CIOs. There's also chief investment officers in certain kind of companies within the data center ecosystem. If you're from like a VC, a venture capital or private equity firm or something like that. But increasingly, we're seeing more CIOs, chief information officers, getting involved in innovation. Cybersecurity tends to be very important, and a lot continue to spend a ton of time on their AI roadmap going forward. Gartner has a CIO agenda as well. Gartner sees the CIO top priorities as focusing on financial impact and prioritizing digital initiatives to align with financial impact, visual metrics hierarchy to communicate all the interdependencies across internal and in some cases external stakeholders, making sure that IT talent is aligned and put together to help support these priorities, and engaging, bringing in, recruiting, and nurturing talent from unconventional sources to solve competitive talent gaps. I also want to share with you, when we look at sizing up the addressable market, what you could potentially be looking at. And for this research, these are simply searches that we ran in LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Like, how many CTOs and CIOs are there that you can reach on LinkedIn? When we look strictly at job titles, and we know that among LinkedIn, because job titles are done through inferential as opposed to always the most structured data, it usually is understated. But at least on a relative basis, this will give you an idea of relative popularity. On a worldwide basis, there's 300,000 CTOs that are LinkedIn members, 82,000 in the US, 86,000 in Europe. CTOs are only about 40% of that total, 120,000 globally. CIOs, 42,000, about a third in the US, about 1/6, 1/5 in Europe. Chief technology, and this is where you see sharp drop off after these two job titles. So most of the job titles heavily, if you're using LinkedIn Sales Navigator or LinkedIn Campaign Manager on the ad side, you'll see the biggest concentration at the most popular titles, the CTOs and the CIOs. There's chief technologist, chief information technology, chief science, depending on the nature of the business, deputy CIO, there's group CIOs, there's deputy CTOs, there's assistant CIOs, global CIOs, interim CIOs. Aren't we all interim, right? It's just interim on, is it short interim or interim like intermediate or years interim? Interim CIOs and acting CIOs, another synonym for interim or short term or temporary, as opposed to being an actor or actress, just kind of phoning it in. So when we look at the much larger segmenting capabilities, when we look at information technology plus C-level CXO in LinkedIn, where we combine the job function and seniority level, you see on a worldwide basis, 260,000, about 100,000 of those in the US, and a little less, about 84,000 in Europe. So this will give you an idea of some of the relative targeting capabilities if you're doing outbound campaigns using LinkedIn Sales Navigator, or you're doing paid ads campaigns using LinkedIn Campaign Manager. But it's a great research tool to kind of size up what is out there. So what should you be thinking about to prepare your team for today's CTO and CIO buyers? Again, as we've talked about throughout Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart, your prospects and clients have really changed how they research and make their purchase decisions when it comes to data center space, dealing with operators, technology companies, facilities companies, construction, real estate, even sales and marketing companies. Big changes in buyer preferences. We used to get a seat at the table for about half of their decision-making process, not even close anymore. We're lucky if we get in there for the final 17% of researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing. And that's a huge problem if you keep doing things the way you've been doing it. But for companies that are willing to make some decisive changes and decide going forward at starting it all the way at your most senior level of leadership in your company, that your company wants to be seen as the definitive go-to experts in your space when it comes to your topic area. There's going to be no one on the planet who's thought of more highly with expertise than your company at the intersection of what you do and your specific addressable market, your geographic region, their company size, their industries and their business models. Drawing that line in the sand and making that the guiding priority going forward can have a massive, massive impact in your positioning and differentiation. The challenge, however, is most firms in this industry are completely unprepared for this once-in-a-generation change in purchase behavior, because, again, we're competing for attention with all of these great digital instant answerers. The digital instant answerers, like the personal assistants and posting questions on social media to our peers, and watching and attending webinars, and watching videos, and listening to podcasts, and going to online review websites. These all are competing for your prospects and clients' attention. How do we show up there? How do we make sure that we're not just living in the past and spending most of our energy chasing an outdated playbook, where all of our efforts are focusing on interrupting people with outbound cold calls and outbound cold emails and outbound cold in-mails to try to get a slot on their calendar to pitch your product and service long before you even know who they are, what they care about, what's going on within their company. But these changes also provide some really big opportunities if you, your sales team, your go-to-market team are able to be seen as the go-to experts, teachers, consultants, trusted advisors, and thought leaders in your space. So let's dig in a little bit to a sample example buyer persona, CTO, CIO, Oscar, and how you might want to engage Oscar based on what we know about CTO, CIO, Oscar. CTO CIO Oscar is a chief information technology officer who may be working in banking, CPG, consumer goods, e-commerce, engineering, financial services, fintech, government, healthcare, insurance, manufacturing, tech, or telecommunications. CTO CIO Oscar tends to be US based, although he certainly has counterparts in Europe and Asia Pacific and Latin America, Africa, all over the place. We looked at what some of those numbers were and what the opportunity looks like simply by digging into job titles in LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And of course, we can add in layers of specialization based on their geography, their job function, their industry, their company size. There's a lot of interesting research slicing and dicing that you can do to figure out your addressable market. Oscar tends to work at a mid-market company with 426 employees. He's got 9 different goals, 8 different challenges, 12 different job title alternatives. That fragmentation is both a challenge and an opportunity for you if you can get your mind around all those little slivers and fragments. At the stage of the career that I am at, I have seen some massive ISVs, software vendors, and hardware companies and publishers in the space get their butt kicked royally by not being really good at fragmentation and segmentation. This is a massive opportunity for you to leap forward if you're able to really understand what's going on inside the mind of your most important buyer personas and the different potential segments, micro personas, sub-personas within that could give you an even greater unlock for relevancy and earning your way in as early as possible. Oscar tends to belong to 47 different LinkedIn groups. He's endorsed for 83 different knowledge identifiers or skills on his LinkedIn profile. He doesn't attend 33 conferences, but he's aware of 33 conferences and goes to a significant amount of them. His peers are attending collectively 33 different conferences. That would be insane, right? That's like one conference every week and a half. Although I follow enough people in the go-to-market teams and digital infrastructure and data centers to know that there are actually a significant amount of people that have what I consider 50% travel jobs, meaning that it's not 26 weeks a year on the road, but it's pretty gosh darn close, 22, 24 different conferences a year, like 2 a month on top of some internal travel needs. I question how they actually have time to get their real job done, but that's a job for another event to discuss how to multitask all of that and delegate that. And there's 27 different publications that are on Oscar's radar screen. Now, building an effective go-to-market strategy can be extraordinarily time-consuming and expensive, but the right go-to-market can be make or break for so many that sell to CTOs and CIOs, especially in the digital ecosystem, digital infrastructure ecosystem, data centers, and critical facilities. Again, as we've talked about earlier today, a buyer persona is a semi-fictional representation of an ideal client or stakeholder that you want to attract and engage, that you want to educate and build trust with, based on actual research and some select educated speculation. Let's double highlight and underscore some, because some companies that I know are literally basing this on internal assumptions. And you've probably heard me say this before, but your buyer persona should maybe be 20-25% internal research, and 75-80% of that research needs to come directly from the mouths of the actual buyer personas if you want to make sure that your messaging really resonates with their biggest goals and challenges in the words that they actually use, not the words that you think that they use, but the words that they actually use. These personas and the resulting go-to-market strategy, the product marketing, the sales enablement, the educational resources, the educational events, this is the key to relevance. This is the key to showing up in a way that gets your most important ideal prospects and clients to pay attention to you, because you're creating and sharing remarkable content and helping them give unlock to how to get to that growth. I'm really curious when it comes to these basic best practices on how to market and sell to CTOs and CIOs. What's your biggest takeaway? What are you planning on doing next when it comes to marketing and selling to CTOs and CIOs? So that brings us to the end of our third section for day 1 of Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart. We started today by looking at Data Center Go-to-Market 101. Then we switched gears up to talking specifically about how to reposition your sales team. Data center sales has changed as your team living in the past. And we were just looking at some best practices around targeting, messaging, relevancy, and showing up early and often in the right context with CTOs and CIOs when it comes to how to market and sell to CTOs and CIOs for data center go-to-market professionals. To give you a quick preview of what's coming next for day 2, Tomorrow for Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart, we'll be talking all about lead generation. The whole day, is all about data center lead generation. We'll start out with the basics, lead generation 101. Then we'll move into data center lead generation 201, the intermediate level course, getting to decision makers and larger sales. And we'll head down the home stretch tomorrow with some advanced best practices, data center lead generation 301. Then day 3 after that will be coming up, where we'll hit on 2 more really, really important topics for data center go-to-market. We'll talk about 5 steps to close sales faster with your data center leads, as well as how to find the right data center niches and avoid commoditization. And we'd love if you could share your biggest takeaway with us now in the chat pane for day 1 of Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart. And thank you, Joseph. We appreciate that feedback. So the final question that we'll be answering today is, what might be the video first version of a white paper? Yeah, that's actually a fantastic idea. That's a fantastic question. So what I would recommend, if you want to use the video first methodology on a piece of downloadable premium content, whether it's a white book or a special report, or a white paper, an ebook, or special report, something like that, I would start by understanding who the buyer persona is and what they care most about. And I would theme the working title of that premium content asset using their exact words and targeting that exact kind of person. The outline for what to cover in that piece of downloadable content could literally be the most important goals that you've discovered in doing the buyer persona research. Over time, you can iterate and do version 2s of this based on additional data that you're capturing in the course of spreading that downloadable piece of premium content. But a good starting point could be just simply taking the biggest goal as the title and the collective goals as your outline, as your table of contents for that. And then I would look to find people internally within your company that are subject matter experts that can answer the question that's directly related to each of those goals. So you find a particular goal for that particular buyer persona, and let's say you have 6 of those. I would see if you can have a subject matter expert internally who can answer all 6 of those. If not, find as many subject matter experts internally that you need to loop them in and interview them, either in person on video or on online video, kind of like what we're doing with this webinar. Record that, post-produce that, release each of those videos as a collection, as a long-form video, release each of those videos separately as a video that's probably, I don't know, anywhere from 3, 5, 10 minutes each. So you may have the collection of 6 videos, let's say for argument's sake, is 45 minutes. Each video is like 7 or 8 minutes long. So you have 6 videos that are an average of 3 to 7, 8, 10 minutes or something like that. And in addition to that, you can chop up those medium length videos and make shorts, that are under 59 seconds, and you can distribute those vertical content. So that's on the video playbook. Then you can take highlights from that and create a slide deck and create a carousel and release those as visual format. And then to turn it into text, transcribe the videos, copy edit the transcription, organize it a little better, fill in any gaps, make sure you double check your quotes and get all the terminology and the jargon the right way. And the transcript from that subject matter expert interview session for the video literally becomes the first draft of your downloadable piece of premium content. I don't want to say easy peasy, but it's a very tried and true methodology that works extremely well. Because as much as you want to think, well, can we really put the same piece of content out there to multiple people? Won't they get tired of seeing it over and over again? Understand there's certain kind of people that like to read. There's certain kind of people that have best intentions when they fill out your landing page form of reading your 20-page downloadable ebook, but they won't get past page 3. So if you have an email nurturing sequence that reinforces and summarizes key points to people that have downloaded the ebook, you'll get them to consume more of that ebook. You'll also find there's people that would never contemplate converting on a landing page for reading something because they like to watch. Those are the people that are going to watch the full video. And some of the people will watch the full 45-minute video. A lot of people have ADD. They don't sit still anymore, but they will be super interested in reading and watching the segment number 2 and segment number 5, if you give them good chapters or bookmarks to jump around so they can cherry pick which of the 2 biggest goals and your answers to those are most relevant to them. And then there's some people that won't even watch a 7-minute video. For those, you'll capture them first with a 37-second short or a 17-second short, and they'll watch more and more of those till eventually some of those people will be like, oh, this is really good. What else do they have to say? And then they'll watch the longer video. Maybe they'll watch the full video, and some of them will go to your landing page for the full piece of premium content and download it. So that's how to do an integrated campaign that combines subject matter expert interviews, long-form video, medium-length video, short-form video, image-based content like carousels, downloadable premium content like an ebook, or a special report, white paper. You can also put that up on a web page as pillar content. You can also break up individual topics from there into individual blog posts with embedded videos and do a hub spoke kind of pillar content cluster arrangement with that as well. So hopefully you found that helpful. And that brings us to the end of day one. Let me see if there's any other questions. No, that was the final question. That brings us to the end of day one of Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart. Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. If we're not currently connected on LinkedIn, feel free to send me a connect request, an invitation to mention that you were on this training event. I would love to connect with you, and we look forward to seeing you back again for day two, where we'll be talking all about lead generation, and day three, where we'll be talking about closing sales faster, identifying niches, and avoiding commoditization. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you back tomorrow. Take care now.